So yeah, thanks for the kind intro, and bonus points for all of you for not being outside on this beautiful, beautiful day, stuck inside with us, so thank you. Appreciate that. There's my handle, there's my website if you want to keep in touch. I'm on pretty much every social thing you could think of. So yeah, actually, my journey has been pretty interesting considering the fact that I started my journey out as a fine artist, and from fine arts I eventually got into motion design, animation, and direction, which led to me being interested in creative direction for new experiences. And as of late, I'd say the last 6 years, I've been a business owner, and my business side of it has led me to build a new culture, and I've called it Leviathan. Why do I call it Leviathan? Led Zeppelin was taken, so I decided to go that way. The founding principle of my studio, though, was that we would take the level of animation that we were doing, say, in the last 10 years or so, like the professional level of animation, and try to put that into new places. And at that time, let's say 2010, not too many companies were doing what we were planning on doing, which is basically taking content, mixing it with engineering, and then putting it in new physical places. So the resulting work that happened really garnered some attention, and we started gaining some new clients. So I've actually cut a reel specifically for this to try to give you some examples of the work we do. Thank you. How many of you have heard of this term, experiential design? Show of hands. Great. How many of you are working with projects that use this term? Cool. Okay. The main reason, this is a whole new talk, and the main reason I've written this talk out is because every time I show my work, or I show work like I've just presented, everyone comes up to me and says, well, how do I start? How do I go about this sort of work? And so this talk is really about that. It's really an exciting new addition to our industry. In fact, I'd say it's so fresh that there isn't really too much information out there for you. So I've done a lot of homework. I'm actually writing a book about the subject as well. So I'm going to use you as sort of test subjects afterwards to see what you've learned here. To put it simply, when we're talking about experiential work, it means creating experiences for people in physical spaces. And now, a lot of what I'm going to be showing you will be digital media in physical spaces. And because most of us here deal with digital work, we're going to focus on that side of it. And the good news that I have for everybody here is that there's such a demand for this type of work. And I think that a lot of it stems from the public's craving of these new experiences. And what that does is it actually creates opportunity for us. So you're seeing the industry really grow at this point. Let's take a look at the industry, though. As I said, I started out motion design, right, animation. My world was a bit limited at that time. But if you look at sort of a snapshot of the professionals that work in our industry now, you start to see it really blossoms out, and our teams are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. How many of you are listed in this little diagram here? Okay. So the beauty of this is there's a new cross-pollination that's happening in the industry that is just incredible. So why do we choose experiential work? Number one is that it is more engaging than traditional media. You can get touchy-feely with this stuff. You can interact with it. You can sense it. You can feel it. It is, without doubt, the most effective way to intrigue audiences. People flock to new things in unexpected places, and that's one way to get more attention. And as I was saying earlier, it's the fastest-growing discipline. We've seen a ton of growth in the last 6 years, especially since starting our company. So back to, hey, how do I start? What do you need? There's 3 things that I wanted to share. Number one is the point of entry for this is collaboration. You have to team up with somebody to get started. No one can do this on their own. The biggest challenge is actually finding other people to do so, and I think being here is the first major step for you. New formats. This is a big thing in my studio. Embracing new formats, getting out of the rectangle, and thinking about new ways to build your content. And also physical realization, and I say that meaning that you need to learn to work in the real world, not just on your computer. So a lot of this is once you get going, working on site and working with physical installations will help you wrap your mind about how to go about it. So there's a few categories that, if you're taking notes, this is probably a good time. There's 5 categories to understand for experiential work. And the first one, probably my favorite, exhibition. The second one is environmental graphics, entertainment, marketing, and placemaking. So these are what we call the verticals in which we work. So the first one, exhibition design, is a fantastic blend of storytelling and environment. This is an example of a commercial context of exhibition. Art exhibitions, definitely my favorite. The neat thing about art exhibitions is that they tend to influence the commercial side of things. So if you start to look at the connection between them, especially when you get into digital work, you're going to see a lot more of that. Environmental graphics, basically this is signage in public places. There's a ton of work here. To the left is a really good example of wayfinding, and to the right is what we just call information. And yes, weather and time can be sexy too. Just look at that. It's so good. There you go. Okay, entertainment. Entertainment's a big thing. We do quite a bit of work in that. Concert and events are usually where that goes, and video mapping and interactive tends to rule this territory. And the cool thing about entertainment work is that it can get into mega scale. Just look at how big that projection is. And marketing is basically, we're going to focus on the digital side of marketing. Interactive experiences like this one for Nike, they're just on the rise. And where would we be without digital billboards? This is very prevalent now, but what these are basically are sensory experiences in public places. Placemaking is something that if you wrap your mind around it, it's really just landmarks saying, hey, you're here, right? Which defines a space. And also media installations like these 2 gorgeous things can be defined as placemaking. What I really, really like about this is the crossover, right? If you start to look at these things and look at the opportunity for style, what's beautiful about this is a lot of us are working on this without even knowing it. We're collaborating on all these different pieces without even knowing. Okay, so the techniques that I really like. I've listed out 7 here, and I'm going to call this my toolkit. And basically, if you adopt these and you think about these before you start your project, you'll have an advantage over your competitors. So let's go through those real quick. Video installations, video mapping, augmented reality, interactive, virtual reality, holographic, and immersive. So these are the fun tools that we work with. Let's get into it. Video installations are perhaps the most well-known. You've been living with them for a long time. The rules with these is they basically can range from 2 to 2,000 screens. They're easy to configure, and the resolution's usually really great. So if you have the budget and the space to do so, this is the way you want to go. Mapping, this is a huge thing. Basically, this requires custom-built or found surfaces, right? So it can be sympathetic to the shape. The cool thing about mapping is that it's versatile and portable. You can take it anywhere, and it can adapt to any surface. Augmented reality, this is a big thing these days. Augmented basically means adding to what is. And what I appreciate about this stuff is that you still need to be in the actual environment to augment it. It's definitely interactive. And then when you get into interactive, it's actually its own category because it's an approach, right? And so this can range from very small to very large. And the kind of the go-tos for this would be touch screens, gesture control, or body tracking. And this can really be in any of the mentioned media formats. Virtual reality, okay, so there's a lot of talk about this. This is one of those things that we use as a technique only when it requires complete immersion, something like this. The interesting thing about this, though, is it requires you to be somewhat vulnerable. So how many of you feel vulnerable when you put one on in public? How many of you are upset because it messes up your hair and it kind of makes you stressed out? It's a weird thing. My clients are always like, hey, we want to put on headsets and we want people to do this in malls and everything. I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't know if that's the right way to go. So it has an interesting challenge set. Holographic, not truly holographic, but this is a term we use. This ranges from very small to very large, right? In this case, it's a concert. This is very popular in the entertainment industry, and CG animation tends to rule this territory. The con for this is it tends to be really expensive to pull off. And then immersive. This is usually projection or screen-based, and it could be a combo of basically all the techniques I've just shown you. And this is really popular for exhibits and I'd say marketing events. These are easy to do pop-up things and marketing situations. So I just hit you with a lot, but I think the takeaway from this is like, all right, well, yeah, we have all those, but how do we choose, right? How do we go about picking the right one? And I think it's really just down to your project. But there's a few notes about that. Usually the budget will dictate that. The timeline, how much time you have to deal with one of these, and what space you have to work with. So for me personally, I usually try to be a little selfish about it and pick the one that I want to learn more about, right? And so if all those things align, then it's like candy store time, and I pick one. So getting started, there's a few notes that may or may not help you, but these are what I do personally. When I get a phone call and someone's like, I want to do an experiential project. Okay, well, let's ask 5 questions, basically internally. What's the meaning behind what your client is trying to do, or even what you're trying to do, and is it correct for you to do? And what's the takeaway message, right? What will the audience have an understanding of? What impact are we having on the audience too? How will they react, right? And then what innovation are we going to pull off? Like, how are we going to better the industry in any way? Is this new territory, or is this sort of predictable territory? And then what does the path look like? What is the start to finish? Will this be a really fun experience, or will it be pure hell? Thinking ahead could make or break you. So this is sort of my checklist, and we'll come back to this. I'm going to show you a project and how it applies. for me, if all of these things check out, my projects are usually really good. When half of these do not work out, my projects usually suffer. So this is a barometer. The people, the players, you have to consider the human emotional connection to what you're doing throughout the project. So, of course, the clients, whoever's paying for your work, you need to think about their expectations and how you're going to manage those expectations. The creators, it's very important to think about your team and their livelihood, right? So sometimes we work on commercial things that could be studio killers. You need to consider your team's happiness ahead of time, or just even if it's you, your happiness. Are you going to be able to deal with it? And consumers, right? So a common mistake is actually forgetting about the end audience. Who's going to actually experience this project? Is this a good thing or a bad thing for them? Think about it from their point of view. And then content strategy, if you think about this ahead of time, you'll actually think yourself later. So there's 3 things to think about here. One, and this is a studio philosophy of ours, is if you're going to create content, your content should be able to live on its own as a video piece, as a movie out there. 2, if you're going to make that video, you need to make it with a physical installation in mind as well, so it looks custom to the installation. And number 3, you need to plan ahead about documenting the first 2 things into the third thing, which is basically your content in action, so you can tell the story of the physical experience. When I get a phone call and they say, oh, great, we want to do this thing, I actually jump to number 3 right away, and I'm thinking already about how I'm going to put all that and what's the takeaway. And the takeaway for me is it should be witnessed by few, as most installations are, but you want it to be experienced by the many, right? And so you want to think ahead about how can you share that experience with the world, with everybody. So I just made this pretty little diagram for you. Basically, this is the content cycle, and let's see how far your content can reach, right? From you've got a screen, and you're going to put it out there. When you move from digital to physical, you want to see if you can get it back to digital. So what happens is you put your content in a physical location, and then what happens is the visitors capture it, and it becomes content again, right? And then you capture it. Let's just say your team shoots it. And then after that, what happens is the visitors, they share it, right? So it goes back out, and then you process and edit it, and you share it. And my theory is that it becomes content once again, thus completing the cycle of life. So let's break down one of my projects. This project is something that nobody has seen yet. It's not even released, so this is my first time running through it. Let's look at everything, though, and sort of apply what we've studied so far. So the category, right, is exhibition. The techniques, interactive, immersive, video mapping, and installations. When I got the call, I was so excited to work on this because it was one of those high-tech projects. Airbus is a very interesting company. Here's a shot of their exhibit as it exists now. This is actually their headquarters in DC. And Airbus is, if you don't know, they're a global aerospace manufacturer. You've likely ridden in one of their jets, but they're just a commercial manufacturer. They also make quite a few other things. They also have a common issue of some of their jets that eat other jets, but they don't eat people, and sometimes those jets multiply and then make more jets that eat other jets. And anyway, that's a tangent. So the cool thing about this is they wanted to plan an experiential tour in their headquarters. So this is sort of a snapshot of the layout. And the neat thing about this tour is like you would actually stop in different interactive spaces to learn more about their culture. The first stop on that tour is actually a real-time data visual installation. And it's real-time 3D stuff, and it's also video of the Earth that basically tells you quantities of flights and passengers and everything that Airbus accommodates. It's really just meant to be a shining piece as you walk through this fancy hallway. So it's a new way to look at video. Here's another shot of it. Also, along the tour, there's an immersive and interactive experience where visitors can learn more about Airbus, their culture, stats, all through an interactive screen and an immersive screen above that. Another stop is a video-mapped immersive experience. This was interesting because some of the early references were architectural in nature, so I got super excited about this once it started coming together. What they wanted to do with this, though, is actually let the visitors who are going on tour actually explore products. So there's an interactive touchpad in front of you, and then the wall in front of them is actually projection mapped. So the visitor is controlling the video mapping. It's very interesting. The wall itself would go through several transformations. These are early renderings of what it would look like. This is another case of people trying to jam too much information into one thing. Final designs started looking like this. Our motion designers had a blast doing that. And then this is a shot from the final experience. And what we landed on was basically it would be a virtual hangar, and the hangar would open up in 3D space and reveal products while the visitors could rotate around them. So for the first time ever, I'm going to play this video. Hope you like it. Thank you. That was a good test run. So there's a few important lessons that we'd learned from this project, and I thought this would be a good venue to kind of show you how I recap things internally. We have quite a few postmortems, right? And which means once the project wraps, we sit down and we try to figure out what we've learned. So let's go back to that list, that foundation list, that checklist. How did we do, right? So what was the meaning behind what our clients wanted? The meaning was that they wanted to say that they're an innovative company. I think that checks out. What's the message? For me, I think they're trying to say that Airbus has a myriad of projects to choose from, products, even jets that eat other jets. And the impact, I would say that it's a state-of-the-art exhibit, and it checks off there. Innovation, definitely full of new technologies and things that feel pretty fresh. Where things got weird, though, is the path. What I had expected and what I had lived through were completely different things. So I was way wrong about the path. The path wasn't A to Z. It was actually like this and full of strange things. But what project isn't, right? So what we do then is we try to figure out obviously, how to better the next one by correcting anything that went wrong. So I thought this would be a good chance to talk to you about proposals. Many people ask me, well, how do you pitch this stuff, right? How do you make decks? How do you make proposals? And I think to make them effective, and this is just my point of view, you really need to focus on a story. What is the human connection between you and your audience, right? And how are you going to connect to the people in the boardroom that you're pitching to, right? And so I always try to weave a story into that. It's something relatable, something that people can kind of grab onto. References, believe it or not, are still extremely relevant with this sort of thing. And I think getting your point across, you're even painting a mood, is still the fastest way to do it. Now, renderings is where experiential work gets a little difficult, but you want to shoot for realism. The jobs where we kind of neglect to do this or neglect to think architecturally about it, we lose our clients. Like, they can't really relate to it. So the renderings we're doing now look like they're coming out of an architecture studio, and I couldn't be any happier. But anyway, this helps give you a real-world sense of scale because you're no longer talking about just video. Also, it's okay to get technical with it, too. So this is from one of our projects, just showing projector placement and just, scale, so people can understand it. And something I preach hardcore in my studio is prototypes. In the pitch phase, if you can put something in someone's hand, you're that much closer to winning the job, so they can relate to your vision. And also, when you can give them something to touch and actually act out, this is actually from Moment Factory, you actually create delight in them, which is kind of a tie to childhood. And so the physical act of doing something in a meeting, never underestimate how powerful that is. Also, demonstrations, right? Don't be afraid to actually create a quick mock-up. These days, you can do more in a day than you could have in the last couple. Even using something like Adobe UX will get you a lot further. So let your clients tap through it and navigate it. Bring an iPad with you. Show them how it works. Put it in their hands. And last but not least, this is the most important. If you're going to pitch an experience, you should make the pitch and experience, right? So your proposal presentation should be custom, and it should really show that you're already thinking in the physical space. So we do a lot of kooky, weird things at our studio, but we build these elaborate kits that we send to our clients. My business partner is always mad at me, but it's okay. Challenges. So let's go over a few things, though, if you're going to do this. Working with new technology, sometimes using projects as guinea pigs to test out new stuff is the best way to go. So we actually plan out safe experimentation, safe interactive experiential experimentation per project. And the way we do that is we try to factor how long it will take for visitors to adapt something new. So one major challenge that we try to overcome is people have trouble correlating to something or adjusting to it. So for one project, we may use gesture control. For another project, we may use tap control, but we only do 1 or 2 new things per project. We never just jump into a project and say, okay, everything's brand new. We always try to pad it a little bit. Another challenge that we have, and this is pretty familiar to you, is how do you compete with the smartphone, the smart device that's in everyone's pocket, right? Why are you going to do this whole elaborate thing and then have people just on their devices? So one thing that we're super hot on is actually creating analog experiences. And what I've learned in the last 3 years is that tactile dials and buttons win over iPhones, right? And so if you can give people control, like nonlinear control, to explore media at their own pace, you will usually win their attention, right? Again, for me, this is right back to childhood. There's something novel about this. Another challenge is constant testing. Once you get into this sort of work, it's a challenge, but also you want to pad in the time to break your work before it goes live. So we're constantly testing our work, which leads me to when things go wrong. So doing anything new comes with risk, and we grow whether or not we succeed. I have a recent horror story. Some clients of mine actually just backed out. They were this close to changing the world with a new video mapped event. It had all this crazy stuff. We were almost done. Someone high up got really scared. They got really scared, and they actually pulled out. So I had to sit my team down and tell them that, you know what, we're not doing the project anymore. We're done. We're going to put it on the shelf, but you know what? It's their loss. Like, what you've learned and what we've been through together, we'll advance it the next time. They chickened out, and, you know, it's too bad for them, but when you strive to do something that new, you're going to find people that are going to get weird and back out on you. So I always say that, you know, you want to try to sense that ahead of time. You want clients that aren't scared, right? You want teammates that are not afraid to try something new. And over time, if you do this enough, you get a sense for people that are committed, people that are signed up. And if you get really good, you can kind of tell by their voice, like early on. And I say, you know, don't worry about it. You know, people will quit on you. Even your own teammates will run away. But it's okay. If you stay focused and you know that this is the future, just keep going. Another thing to be wary of is, you know, a typical project killer is that people try to go too big the first time they go out. Every time my clients call me, they're looking for consultation. They want to, say, projection map the skyline of Chicago, right? You want to make 2,000 screens, all interactive. That's great, but this is your first time doing it. So every single time, I always come back to them and I say, well, why don't we do this? Let's keep that as a goal, but why don't we start a little bit smaller so we can add on as we go? And usually that works. I've had projects fail because people tried to go too large too soon. Another common problem is that technology will fail you. Every time we do something, something goes wrong. So I know we're all into technology in this room, but I want you to think about it as kind of like it's junk. Don't worry about it. It will fail you. I've suffered power outages at live events. I've suffered system failures, computers breaking, skipping videos, you name it. But the only way to deal with it is to roll with it. Sometimes people don't even notice, so it's all how you deal with it. The positive side, how to make it better. As you go about your own projects, I've got some advice for you. Number one is adding a third dimension to the 2D world is the best way to wow people, transforming what is into something else. I spend most of my time at my events in the back looking at what people react to and how they're delighted, right? And so usually when there's an illusion of some sort, it doesn't even have to be 3D. You engage people on another level. Choreography is something we throw around quite a bit in our studio. Again, when you're looking at your work in the real space, observe human beings. Like, how long does it take your eye to wander from the left to the right, up and down? I really challenge you guys to go out and do your homework and think about, you know, how, if you're going to make content for that, for large installations, how are you going to adjust the movement in the real space? And the other thing is, you know, where I've failed in my past is where I've become too reliant on technology, or I've actually written a story around technology, which made me software dependent for a look for something. And I just think that your idea should be able to survive passing of decades. It should not feel like, you know, 2016. It should feel like it's just timeless. So great stories usually win out. If you don't know any good writers, get to know one, because a good story comes with good writing. So in our studio, when we have a bad story, it usually goes wrong. So we try to spend as much time as we can up front writing and developing and really trying to get it before we even apply the technology. And then, you know, you really need to defy limitations. Again, back to the naysayers, you're going to have limited budgets. You're going to have people in your own studio trying to tell you to keep it down, don't shake the world too much. But if you listen to everyone every time they said, keep it down here, you're never going to have a great portfolio. So you need to remember that it's your job to push beyond that boundary, beyond that limitation, and you'll keep pushing towards better work. But the biggest message I have for you, you know, we have some creative people in the room, some technology people, producers, business sides, is you have to communicate. Do not work in a silo. Spend time talking to each other. Learn how to collaborate. what makes experiential design what it is that communication between everyone. So you really need to think about ways to band together. And being at this conference is a real good start. I think that you'll probably meet someone here and spark a new relationship and get going to define new experiences. Thank you.